I am going to show you the best cards in Master Duel that you may want to craft because they work in so many decks. Now do stick around because not all of these will go into every deck, but a lot of the cards here are super versatile and some of them are outright broken and will up your win rate a lot. So starting off with Effect Veiler. This is a hand trap, meaning you can activate it from the hand, and then usually hand traps will disrupt your opponent. So Effect Veiler, basically when your opponent does something in their main phase, you can send this from your hand to the graveyard and negate a monster effect. So this is a big deal because your opponent might play one monster that then leads to the next and to the next and to the next, and their whole combo starts working just because they had that one monster. If you Effect Veiler it, now their turn basically ends. Now this isn't always the case, you know, some good decks have a follow-up play, but it's really gonna disrupt some of the best decks out there. Now I personally haven't crafted this yet because on this list there are cards that are even better in my opinion and that are more important than this. But if you already have these, or maybe your deck or the meta really calls for Effect Veiler, this is still an incredible hand trap. Next we have Max C. This is the best hand trap. This card is broken beyond belief. The only reason you wouldn't craft this is because you're afraid that there's gonna be a new ban list like the TCG, because in the TCG, Max C is banned. But in the OCG, you know, the Japanese side of the game, it isn't banned. So if you are relying on the game to stay OCG, Max C is a must craft for almost any deck. Very often when you play a Max C, your opponent ends their turn. That means now you get to do your combo, or you even get to just one turn kill them out of the game just like that. Max C is incredible, Max C is insane, Max C is broken. So as long as they don't ban it, you probably want to run it. That's how insane the card is. I don't know what else to say. Next, we have Ash Blossom. This might be the second best hand trap because of how versatile it is. Essentially, when your opponent uses a effect that says add a card from deck to hand, so that can also be a draw, special summon from the deck, or send a card from the deck to the graveyard, you can then Ash Blossom it to negate it. So there's a bunch of decks out there that have a card along the lines of, when you play this, search for a given thing, and then you basically start your whole combo. If you Ash them then and there, they often just need to end their turn. There's also good cards that require you to pay a cost to then draw cards, but then Ash stops that and they've already paid their cost for no reason. So again, an incredibly good card. But also an important part of Ash is Max C also draws cards. So you can negate a Max C with an Ash. So when everyone is playing Max C to ruin your day, you want to be able to play Ash to stop their Max C from working. So for that reason, Ash is definitely on the list. Luckily, you got one for free if you listen to my master guide or you already know about that info. But once again, this is one of those cards that's probably a must staple in almost every deck. So as you can see from the cards that I have and don't have, Max C and Ash, those were the first things I crafted. I just had to have them because of how good they are, and they are currently in every deck I play. Next, we have Foolish Burial. This one doesn't fit into every deck, but there are a lot of decks that require on the graveyard, and then having access to Foolish Burial, which just says look for anything, is really good. It is limited for a reason. That's how good it is. It's not for every deck. Again, if you're playing some deck that doesn't require the graveyard, forget about this card. But if you are playing a bunch of graveyard-based decks, Foolish Burial is definitely going to be part of them. Next, we have Lightning Storm. Lightning Storm is an incredible card, but it is not quite as impactful as Max C and Ash. So you don't need this in every deck, but it is a really good comeback card. Or like your opponent went first, they set up a bunch of stuff. If they don't have protection from something like a Lightning Storm, you can just wipe away all the work they just put in, and that's pretty solid. Luckily, you did get one for free from the bundle, but I did end up crafting one more copy because I do like to have access to such destruction effect. But I wouldn't say it's quite as needed as the Ash and the Max C. Next, we have Called by the Grave. Once again, an incredible card, and it's semi-limited for a reason. Called by the Grave, essentially you choose a monster in your opponent's graveyard and you banish it, and then the effects of that monster are negated. What does that mean? You can banish a Max C or an Ash that is being used against you. So let's say you have your hand, you see, wow, I'm gonna do a sick combo, I'm gonna do some stuff. You start and they go, ha ha ha, Max C or ha ha ha, Ash. Then you're like, damn, now my combo doesn't work. You activate Called By because it's a quick play, so you can actually instantly activate it from the hand like that in your own turn. And then you just banish that card, negate its effects, and you can keep on comboing off. So this is really good in combo decks specifically, but even non-combo decks sometimes like to have that just to be able to play around an Ash or a Maxi or something like that. Next we have Cross Out Designator. This is basically kind of like Called By's brother, but a bit different. This basically says you choose a card name, you banish it from your main deck, and if you do, you negate its effects. So if your opponent uses Maxi or Ash or Effect Veiler, and you run a copy of that yourself, and I assume you're gonna run a copy of Maxi or Ash yourself, you can use this like a called by, and you can just say, oh, no, you don't get to use Maxi or Ash. Kind of like called by. However, you can also set this, and then in your opponent's turn, you can negate other stuff as well. So maybe you're playing like a mirror match. Maybe your opponent is playing the same deck as you, and you get to use this. Or maybe you activate something like a Maxi or an Ash, and then they called by it. Now you can use Crossout Designator on your own called by to stop their called by. Yeah, it's getting very complex here, but Crossout is basically a more and less versatile called by. That's why I have both. I have 2 of each. Crossout is definitely less important of a craft, I want to say, because it also relies on you having certain hand trap. You need to have Effect Veiler or Imperm to be able to even stop those. Now, called by doesn't stop Imperm, so that's pretty important, and Crossout does. So again, you're kind of like considering you're hedging your bets here, but I think called by is also just easier. So if you're maybe a little bit newer to the game and you don't want to have to think too much about all kinds of stuff, usually called by is going to be an easier, like, boom, I just use it, whatever, and you don't have to think about what else to put in your deck and build. And maybe you only have one Ash, maybe, and then you drew it, and now you can't cross out anymore because you need to send it from deck. So a lot of reasons as to why, if you're newer, called by is probably just an easier craft than a Crossout. Crossout relies on you having a bunch of other ultra rares. Next up, we have Forbidden Droplets. This card, again, is incredible. This card basically allows you to negate a bunch of stuff. If your opponent made the most incredible, insane board, Forbidden Droplets can help you break it by negating some stuff. Now, you do need to discard for it, and you need to discard a bunch for it, so it doesn't fit every deck. If your deck requires a big part of your hand to do its combo, Forbidden Droplets might not be as great. So usually Droplets is going to shine more in a meta deck that can play with 1 card or 2 cards, rather than some of the weaker decks that might need 4 cards to do certain plays. For this reason, Forbidden Droplets is also not in all of my decks. I haven't even crafted it just yet, because sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna Droplets here, but I'm gonna have to sacrifice my Maxi and my Ash. Won't even be able to have a full combo. It is incredible though. It's definitely on this list. It might be right after Maxi, Ash, and Called By for me personally, but again, it's not gonna work quite as well in your Blue Eyes deck or in your Elemental Hero deck as it is in some of the top tier decks, but definitely still an incredible craft. Next, we have Infinite Impermanence. This card is again a hand trap, but a bit of a different one, because this isn't a monster. This is an actual trap. You just happen to be able to use it from your hand, but not always. So your field needs to be empty in order to use it from your hand. The other pro, however, is that you can set this. So let's say you went first and you have the Imperm in your hand, you can just set it and then use it in your opponent's turn still. So it's not the worst thing to happen, but it's still something. It's still slightly worse. With that being said, it's still very versatile. You can basically target one face-up monster your opponent controls and negate its effects. So maybe at the start of your own turn, you drew this, your field is still empty, you just activate this, choose one of your opponent's monsters, and now it doesn't work, so now you can start playing around their field more easily. Definitely still a strong hand trap. I haven't made it, but I probably should. Basically everything on this list, except for maybe the Foolish and maybe the Effect Veiler from this main deck list, at least I should probably make. It's all ultra rares, so you have to pick and choose a little bit. Next, you have Imperial Order. This card negates all spell effects. That's it. It negates all spells. So if your deck requires a lot of spells to work, this might not be the card for you, but there are a lot of combo decks that don't actually use spells that much. They mostly rely on their effect monsters, or maybe they use their spells in their own turn, and then next turn they flip the Imperial Order, so now you don't get to play with spells, but they already have. That's why this card is so good. That's why it's also limited to 1. It's a very unfair, unfun card. For the longest time it was banned, and then they brought it back. So Imperial Order, definitely very strong, but again, a bit more deck dependent. If I had to start crafting, I saw this list, I'm like, damn, I definitely can't craft them all. I would start with the Maxi, I would start with the Ash, I would start with maybe the Called By, and then I would start looking into the other cards. Now, for the extra deck, these again are going to be a bit more deck dependent, because, well, can your deck make them, right? I can tell you go make these because they're so strong, but maybe your deck doesn't even have the summons to make them. Regardless, I still wanted to talk about them because they are impactful and they are going to work in a lot of decks, but be mindful there as well. So first of all, we have Zeus. Zeus is limited to 1 for a good reason. This boy wipes boards. This is the best going second card ever. Maybe behind Forbidden Droplets or Dark Ruler No More. Speaking of Dark Ruler No More, he should probably also be on this list, but I wanted to keep it to 10 cards. But you know what? We'll add it right now. Going off script here, Dark Ruler No More, Also an incredible card. You basically negate all of your opponent's stuff. However, it is worse than droplets because your opponent will be taking less damage that turn. So if you wanted to break a board and then OTK them, you usually can't with Dark Ruler, but it's still a very, very strong card. Back to the extra deck. Zeus is basically a going second card as well. It can wipe your opponent's board, but sometimes you can also just put it up as insurance. Let's say your opponent already did a turn, then it's your turn, you already broke his board. Now you have to end on something, and you end on a Zeus because you know whatever my opponent is going to do next, I'm going to wipe it anyway. It doesn't even matter. And then next turn, I still have a Zeus and I ram his face and I win. So very solid card. The only downside to this card is that it needs Xyzes to work. You need to be able to make an Xyz in your deck in order to use this card. So maybe your deck doesn't make Xyzes and then you can't make Zeus. Good decks that make Xyz are stuff like Tri-Brigade Zoo, Virtual World, PK. They make Xyzes. Very rarely Eldritch can also make an Xyz, though they often don't need it. They often don't need Zeus either, but it's an option for sure. Overall, though, very versatile card, but again, not part of every deck. Next, we have Almirage. This card, it's cute, but clearly, it's not the most scary boss. You will see this be part of a lot of decks, because one normal summoned monster with 1000 or less attack is what you need to make it, and so clearly that's easy as hell to make. So it's often going to be part of a combo. You know, you summon something and you turn it into that, and then you do some billion other things. So for that reason, it's on the list because it's part of a lot of decks combos, but it's not something you want to be putting into every deck. So when you're building a bunch of decks and you start noticing, hey, this bunny seems to be in every list I make, sure, then you want to have this bunny. But otherwise, again, it's not going to be this high impact insane card like the Maxi we just spoke of. Next, we have Boral Sword Dragon. Now, before you start making Boral Sword Dragon, I do have to say access code is often better. But with that being said, Boral Sword Dragon is a huge boss. It basically OTKs. If you make this card, you are going to OTK very, very easily. OTK, one turn kill, by the way. If you are able to make 4 monsters some way, or maybe a Link 2 and 2 more monsters, whatever you end up doing, you can make a Boral Sword and you can OTK. So for that reason, you will very often look at extra decks and you will notice, hey, this deck has a Boral Sword, or hey, this deck has an access code. They kind of do the same thing, but in different ways. Access code came out later, so it's a bit better in more situations, but I don't discount either of them. And if you've been opening Stalwart Force to figure out what kind of top deck you want to use, Boral Sword might already be in your card pool. So very strong card. In the same vein of if you can make 4 monsters, we have Apollousa. Apollousa is basically the going first version of these two boys. So if you went second and you want to OTK your opponent, you're usually going to make a Boral Sword or an access code and just ram through them. If you're going first and you're able to make a bunch of monsters, Apollousa is really solid because she is a bunch of negates in one card. The more cards you used to make her, the more negates she will give you. So for that reason, again, if you made this incredible combo board, you will watch these crazy videos on YouTube where they go summon, 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 summon. They will often end on a bunch of cards and an Apollousa, and that Apollousa will just negate, 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 negate. So for this reason, it's part of a lot of combo decks, and for this reason it's on the list. But again, can your deck make those combos? Yes or no, that will depend, and therefore it's not as important in my opinion as a Maxi, an Ash, or a Called By. Finally, we have access code. So like I said, it's kind of like a Boral Sword. It's often better. It can nuke opponents' boards, and then it can also OTK pretty easily. It becomes huge, and you will usually need another card beyond him to be able to OTK, because usually he caps out a bit lower than the 8,000 you need, but still high enough to usually you're gonna OTK with access code. So these are the best ultra rares to craft. Again, if you're trying to stick to a budget or something like that, most decks are gonna like having Maxi and Ash, and then maybe Called By to stop your opponent's Maxi and Ash. Those are like the first things to target in my opinion. Again, gonna kind of depend on the deck, but all the other cards on this list are again very solid. Be sure to listen to the explanations I gave you, because making a Foolish Burial when your deck doesn't use graveyard cards would be very, very sad. Hope you found it interesting. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch. Link is in the description. I stream almost every day, playing, of course, Master Duel, and I will see you soon. Ciao.